Hi, everybody. It's Mary, the OG Woo Woo therapist. And as usual, everything I talk about today is not intended to take the place of counseling or therapy, but to highlight some of the issues that could or need to be addressed with a licensed counselor or therapist. For some, it will be information to increase understanding of therapeutic issues and processes. None of the information that I'm going to talk about should be used to self-diagnose or diagnose others with mental health disorders or issues. Related to the topics discussed today, only a licensed practitioner can and should do that. My apologies that I did not get this done yesterday for whatever reason. The very lively Hispanic family upstairs from me decided that it was a day to listen to music and to dance around. And the floors and ceilings, my ceiling, their floor, is very thin. So I hear them walk a lot. And I elected not to record this yesterday because there is somebody up there that when they walk, it sounds more like jumping. And when I tried to record, it sounded like thunder. So I elected to record it this morning when I had some time and after the apartment complex settled down a little bit. I record this in my home office. I don't have a studio, so it is going to be fraught with outside noises and my dog coming in and out and whoever she might be getting excited at the front window. So I'm hoping that now that everybody has gone to school and gone to work from our buildings here, that she will have a quiet day. The only thing that could interfere with that are cats. She's very fond of cats. She likes to sit in the window, actually on the back of my chair in front of the front window. And then when the cats walk by, she barks at them. So if that does start, I will attempt to edit out as much of that as I can. Otherwise, we just may have to go ahead and let her bark. Previously, I discussed the diagnosis of CPTSD or complex PSD and talked about the difficulty with self-organization that is the signature symptom. I talked about dissociation as a common symptom as well with dissociation. I've also described the types of dissociation and talked about them on a continuum and talked about internal family systems last podcast, which is not a dissociative response to trauma. Today, I want to connect what I have talked about so far and give some examples of what it could look like when I have a client that has CPTSD. So as a reminder, what trauma really is not what most people think. Most people think trauma is the storm that happens or the abuse. But trauma is what happens inside the house during the storm. For example, someone grows up in a home where nothing terrible happened, but emotions were ignored, minimized, or unpredictable on the part of the adults in the house, resulting in emotional abuse. As an adult, they're capable and responsible, but they feel tense all the time, they overthink interactions, they don't know how to rest, and cannot relax. They are constantly on guard. They often say things like, I don't know why I feel like this. My childhood wasn't that bad. And other than being neglected, it wasn't that bad when compared to what most people think about when they think of child abuse. What I want to name here is that the nervous system doesn't organize around whether something was bad enough. It organizes around whether there was enough safety, attunement, which is the ability to deeply connect and resonate with another person's emotional state by becoming aware of and responsive to their feelings, that creates a sense of being seen and understood, and then also repair. Where repair is less about fixing the problem, but more about getting back on track or bringing the nervous system back online. This speaks to when people minimize their own pain. That's often another adaptation, not evidence that nothing happened. Many times I hear people say, well, my childhood wasn't as bad as their childhood was, but that does not mean that they did not have traumatic response to the things that happened around them. Now let's revisit parts and talk about them as a cast of characters. And this is relevant to IFS and dissociation. Think of the mind like a cast of characters. For example, a first person feels grounded most of the time, but during conflict, They suddenly feel small, panicked, or desperate. Later, they think, why did I react like that? That didn't feel like me. When clients say this, I'm listening for the state shifts or the parts that may be presenting. That moment wasn't irrational, it was contextual. A younger part stepped forward because the nervous system recognized a familiar relational threat. This isn't regression, it's memory without words. This can be indicative sometimes of wounding from trauma at very, very young ages before the acquisition of language. When we think about ego state dissociation, we know that different parts can and do hold different emotional realities. For example, someone is competent and confident at work, but mild criticism sends them into shame or freeze. They know logically it's not catastrophic, but their body disagrees based on previous lived experience. And what that looks like many times when they are criticized, that freeze into shame, is a lot of times the emotional reaction that has been exiled or sent to the side where they don't no longer have to think about it or experience it, because the brain tells them, if we continue to feel like this, we will die. And when we talked about dying, when we talked about dissociation, we talked about death of the body, but we also talked about being annihilated. So death of the person, not always the body. This is a classic sign that different parts learn different rules for survival. Excuse me. One part learned, I can handle this, where another learned, mistakes are dangerous. Therapy isn't about convincing the scared part. It's about building enough safety that it no longer has to take over to create safety. Now I would like you to think about dissociation as a circuit breaker for the nervous system. Dissociation is the symptoms circuit breaker. For example, someone realizes they've missed a part of a conversation, or they drive somewhere and don't remember the trip, or instead of crying, they go numb. One person says, it's like my body leaves the room before I do. And this is a very interesting concept. A lot of times people will confuse this with depersonalization that we talked about before, or derealization. And it's not that they feel like they have left their body or experienced the depersonalization. It just feels like their mind is somewhere else and their body is somewhere else while they're zoned out or not paying attention as an onlooker might see what it looks like. This is the nervous system protecting against overload in the nervous system. People often worry this means they're broken or not present enough, but dissociation is usually always developed because presence in the situation wasn't safe at some point. The goal isn't to eliminate it, it's to reduce the need for it. Now let's look at structural dissociation like rooms in a house. Some rooms were closed and stay closed for a reason. For example, someone says, I'm over my childhood, but when they slow down, they feel anxious or empty. They stay busy to avoid that feeling, and also to not even think about that feeling. Often they have protective gaps in their memories and cannot recall important events in their life or life transitions. Frequently, I have clients tell me that they can't remember anything before the age of puberty, or they can't remember anything after the age of 5 up to high school, or they don't remember the 5th grade, or they don't remember high school. This is what it looks like when functioning parts are doing their job very well. Avoidance isn't denial, it's protection. Therapy respects that protection and eases the doors open instead of forcing them open. We work to allow the brain to remember rather than forcing the brain to remember. Now let's talk about attachment trauma. I mentioned that briefly in the previous podcast. And so what I'd like to do now is kind of explain it in a way that hopefully will make sense. So let's think about the nervous system as a GPS. So attachment is what programs the GPS or works as the GPS operating system. For example, someone wants intimacy very deeply, but when a relationship gets close, they feel trapped or numb and sometimes anticipate being hurt again, and they'll do whatever they need to do to not be hurt. They'll pull away, then feel lonely and abandoned. And they say, I don't understand myself. I don't know why I do that all the time. Why do I like people? And when it feels like they're starting to get close, I do these destructive things and I push them away, and people just go away. They always go away. This isn't ambivalence, and it isn't necessarily fear of intimacy. However, it is fear of intimacy because of the fear that they will be hurt if they let people get too close. This is an indicator of competing survival strategies. One part learned that closeness equals safety, maybe while they were being rocked as an infant or held and comforted as an infant. And another part learned, maybe later on in life, that closeness equals danger. But both are trying to help. So we can look at attachment styles as weather strategies. We brace differently depending on the climate we grew up in. I grew up in Southern California where we had frequent earthquakes during the time that I was a kid there. I lived there from 5th grade on up into an adult. And it was old hat to me when an earthquake happened. But when I moved to Texas and an earthquake happened there in Texas, the reaction of the folks around me was one of alarm and looking for safety. By the same comparison, when I moved to Texas, I was now living at the bottom of Tornado Alley. Tornadoes panicked me, but others around me were calm and focused on safety. There wasn't one tornado in Southern California in the 40 years that I lived there. So my nervous system was not used to the kind of imminent, unstoppable danger a tornado presents, but I was used to rolling with the earthquakes. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but when you live on the beach in Southern California, because it's limestone, sandstone, it's very flexible. And so in other places, when earthquakes happen where it feels very jerky, where I lived in Southern California by the beach, it was rolling ground waves that came through. It was a very interesting experience, especially if you happen to be driving. So another example of treating attachment like a weather system is that one person monitors their relationships constantly, always looking for the problem, not realizing that by looking for the problem, they may already be treating the person like there is a problem. And another one may avoid needing anyone. And this isn't to be confused with introversion. And it's not to be confused with anybody that might have a disorder on the spectrum. There are some people that just avoid closeness, so they don't need anybody. And they'll even say so, I don't need anyone. Where an introvert may say, I just don't want to be around anyone. So another person in this weather scenario, another one moves toward closeness and away from it at the same time. So in their conversation, they may say, I really want to be loved, but I just know that they're going to hurt me. Or every time someone gets close to me, it feels so dangerous. These are not personality traits. These are patterns of attachment. They are nervous system predictions. And predictions can be updated, but only through new experiences of safety. And what that looks like is that a person forms a relationship with someone that they perceive to be safe, and then that safety persists in the relationship. Even though there may be confrontations or conflict or disagreements, those kinds of things that may happen in the relationship, they're still able to stay because it still feels safe. And finally, we can look at CPTSD like the alarm system of the nervous system. So CPTSD keeps the alarm running constantly. It's like the robot in Lost in Space continually saying, "Warning, Will Robinson," 24/7. Or if you have that neighbor that goes away to work and then their smoke alarm starts going off, that beep, beep, beep every few minutes of their alarm while they're away. So an example of that would be someone says, "I feel like I'm too much and also never enough at the same time." They experience emotional swings, shame, and unstable relationships. They are constantly on the lookout for signs of approval from others, but when they get them, they don't necessarily always believe them, or they begin to wait for the thing that happens that hurts them. This is what happens when the system never got to stand down. So the alarm is constantly going off, constantly anticipating danger, and every little thing that happens that feels like it could be dangerous, they react to either with an overreaction or no reaction or shutting down or running away. These reactions make sense when we understand the history, even if they feel confusing now. This is why it's important to understand cognitive development and child development, because the stage of development determines the type of incorporation of outcomes into the nervous system and whatever cognitive awareness might be available to the individual. Most of the reactions come out of the subconscious. So when someone overreacts in a situation like that, especially when we're talking about ego state dissociation and structural dissociation, when we're talking about that, something happens and this wounded part comes racing out of wherever they've been to take care of this situation. The problem is that wounded part, if it's 6 years old, it comes racing out to take care of it like a 6-year-old. So frequently, people with CPTSD and dissociative disorders will hear people say, "Why are you overreacting?" Or they may hear them say, "Why are you being so childish about this?" And those are all indicators of childhood abuse of some sort. I typically ask my clients, if they don't volunteer it, did anybody ever say to you in your life, "Why are you overreacting? Why are you being so childish about this?" Because those are indicators to me that there is some complex trauma. It may not be really evident because they may be one of those individuals that believes my childhood wasn't always that bad. I didn't get beat up. I didn't get locked in a closet. I didn't get starved. None of that happened to me. But they were not emotionally cared for. They were not physically cared for. They weren't given baths. Their hair wasn't brushed. They weren't taken care of in a way that a child needs to be taken care of by the primary adult caregivers in their lives. This type of trauma or trauma effect that happens with neglect, emotional abuse, mental abuse that we talked about before, this kind of trauma doesn't leave any scars. And it is harder to recover from because it feels so dang normal to these people that they don't even know that they're being damaged. But they are waiting for the annihilation because that's what set them up to begin to believe that this is normal. So with that being said, I want to restate here that these reactions come out of the subconscious. They are not executive function decisions that the brain is making in the moment. These are things that have been shoved away, pushed away, that they don't even want to think about, and they don't even want to acknowledge the existence of feeling like that. But boy, when something comes up that triggers that emotional reaction in them, boom, here comes that part to take care of the situation. This is part of what makes therapy feel hard. And it is because therapy activates attachment and can trigger dissociative episodes. By that I mean that the therapist many times is the first person that the individual is able to connect with that feels safe in any kind of way. And trust me, I have been tested by people to make sure that they can feel safe with me. They will say things, they will do things, they'll tell me things to see my reaction, to gauge my reaction. And when I have a compassionate, loving, safe reaction to whatever they have said or done, then that is what begins to build trust with me in the therapeutic relationship. So a client will feel close to their therapist, then sometimes they panic and shut down or they go away. I hear that a lot. Well, I think I'm just being too needy for you. I think I'm just too much for you. I don't know if I can continue to do this because it feels like I'm burdening you with my problems. They worry that they are too needy and they want to quit after having a really good session. I have this conversation or this very thing happen frequently with my clients. And for me, this is a factor in attrition from therapy. People go away because they are so uncomfortable with feeling safe. They do not know what that feels like, and their nervous system has difficulty regulating that because it does not feel normal. This is not resistance. This is the attachment system coming back online. And they suddenly become aware that they care about their therapist. And many times I've heard from wounded parts, I wish you had been my mom. And I hear that a lot, and it's a thing that we have to be careful about with transference and countertransference. And I say frequently to my clients when I hear that, is that you did deserve a better mom than you had. This is the attachment coming back online. This is someone coming home and turning off the alarm. The work here isn't pushing through. The work here is done by me noticing, naming, and helping them repair the wound for themselves. They get back on track, or back online, if you will. And like when you lose internet connection for a minute, only the opposite is true. There is more connection, and that feels scary when it has never been experienced in any real way before. Going slow is the only way to work with these things, and slow is skilled therapeutic care. A lot of times my clients will ask me, I just want to feel better, like yesterday. And the problem with it is we can't feel better that quickly. There is so much to repair. A lot of times people will think about the work that we have to do with these folks with dissociation and with CPTSD as learning to reparent themselves. And sometimes it feels like that. But mostly it's about learning to identify when there is a part that is struggling or having a problem, and then helping them to understand and have compassion for that part because of what happened and the fact that there was no adult around to help them. So healing is not about intensity. It is about consistency with the work in therapy. Present day orienting for the parts is imperative to help the parts feel safe in the here and now and begin to realize that they are no longer in the there and then. Because if you remember, we talked about Traumatized parts reside in the past, in the moment of trauma. That is where they exist until something happens present day that reminds them of that, and then they show up present day to create safety. But it feels like it's happening to them now, and it's not. It is simply a memory of what it felt like then and there. So, an example. Someone says, I have spent my life bracing for impact. Therapy taught me how to unclench. That unclenching is the nervous system learning something new. It's subtle, it's cumulative, and it's deeply meaningful. This makes the therapeutic relationship the most important thing in the process of recovery from dissociation and attachment issues. Healing shows up quietly. I spend a good deal of time planting seeds for the next stage of recovery and allow the process to progress at its own pace. I work with clients to help them become permissive with themselves and understand that everything that they think and feel is okay, even if it doesn't feel good. There are no bad feelings, but feelings that are connected to bad things that happened can feel like they're bad and can feel like they want to avoid them. What I hear is that clients notice they recover faster after a trauma reaction or after some part has been activated, and then the response happens, and then we can work to build understanding of why they did what they did. What's going on with that? They tolerate disagreement better and can begin to hold two seemingly conflicting emotions at the same time. They can feel disappointed but not destroyed, which means that they no longer have to shut down or withdraw in shame. These are markers of integration, which I've talked about integration before. Now, what we look at it is that the parts begin to work in a cohesive, integrated fashion together. It's not that all of the parts have become one, but all of them have learned to work together, and none of the parts feel endangered. All of the parts are beginning, or some of the parts are beginning to feel safe. And it's not because the parts have disappeared or the past has disappeared, but because the present feels safer for all of the parts. And that's why it's imperative that people with dissociation and attachment issues remind themselves every morning when they wake up. Today is January 23rd, 2026, and we are this many years old, and we have been an adult for a very long time. And I promise that I, the adult here right now, am not going to let anything happen today that is going to make you feel unsafe. And if it does, you and I together will figure it out. So learning to work with the parts, the reactions that the parts have, and understanding why the parts are reacting the way they are, it's how we begin the process of integration. So in closing, I want to say, as I said at the beginning, this is not for self-diagnosis or diagnosing anyone else. But if you heard yourself in these stories, I want you to hear this very clearly. You are not broken. Your nervous system adapted intelligently to earlier conditions. Remember when I talked about before the amazing capacity of the child's brain to create dissociation in the first place, to survive these horrible things that are happening on the inside of them as a result of what might be happening around them? Your nervous system adapted intelligently to earlier conditions. And intelligence may be that cognitively your brain wasn't even really capable of in terms of executive function, but it was capable of it in terms of survival. Healing isn't about erasing parts of you. And it isn't about forgetting the past. Healing is about helping folks realize they're safer and in the here and now and don't have to work so hard anymore to keep themselves safe. If you saw yourself in any of this, please reach out to a licensed therapist and begin the process of recovering yourself from your past. I have a sign on the wall in my office that says, "Never be a prisoner of your past. It was just a lesson, not a life sentence." And that is the position that I work from with all of my clients. So with that, I wish you a happy day today. Go out and take on the day and be successful in life. And if you need a therapist, again, you can look in the back of Psychology Today. If you don't have someone who can recommend a good one to you, you can read the bios there and pick one that sounds like they just might be the ticket for you. So have a good one, and we'll talk to you next week.